Welcome back. All right, welcome back. So you share a house, you share bills, you share children, you may even share the same bed. But when was the last time you actually felt desired? Because there's a difference between being married and simply operating a household together. When your marriage becomes all responsibility, routine, and predictability, no flirting, no touch, no mystery, no sexual energy, you're no longer functioning like lovers, right? Maybe friend, maybe homie, but definitely not like lovers. And you're becoming roommates. So today we're breaking down exactly how that happens and what you must stop doing before this roommate marriage turns into separation or an affair or divorce. Welcome back. There's something I wanted to share. I want to share what I call the roommate gravity loop with you. The roommate, let's call it the roommate gravity loop. All right, I'll tell you why I call it that in a second here, but let me just push this out there for you so you can see what we're about to discuss today and how dangerous it is if you're in a marriage like this, right? Now, ultimately, our goal by the end of this session is to we're trying to get to attraction, okay? Attraction, reconnection, but ultimately awareness, so you can repeat over and over and over again so everybody else can call you lucky, right? But it's because you know what you're doing, right? So this whole thing is triggered by routine. We call it routine. All right, routine is a negative thing. It's not a good thing. Okay, well, it's not, it wasn't designed to be. It's not, well, it's just life, right? You have routine in life, right? And this routine is not, it wasn't supposed to be a bad thing, but it ends up becoming a bad thing. Anything can metamorphose, what's the word, metamorphosize into so routine turns to neglect, to resentment. Let's put that on the board real quick. Routine turns into neglect. Yeah, routine turns to neglect, right? And neglect turns into resentment. This is the path that most people are on. This is what we're trying to avoid, right? It turns to resentment. You say how? I'll explain it in a second here, right? And yeah. So today we're going to talk about if your marriage feels like roommates. I'm going to help you solve through that, okay? All right. So resentment turns into withdrawal. Withdraw. Right? Now from withdrawal, what do we have? We have rejection, we have obsession, we have once you get rejected, once you feel rejected in your own marriage, the next thing that usually comes after that is obsession, right? Because rejection breeds obsession. So I'm going to put that here. Withdrawal leads to a feeling of rejection, leads to, now the natural reaction from that is obsession. Start getting obsession, obsession, it breeds obsession, okay? Lord help me today. This is very important that you understand this, because if you don't, it doesn't mean it won't happen, because a lot of this is not action things. They're basically one thing give birth to another, and oftentimes these are behaviors that come from subconscious, at least subconscious, at most or at best subconscious. You don't just decide to do these things, right? They just kind of happen. Obsession leads to neediness. All right. Obsession leads to neediness. All of this is negative when it comes to attraction, right? No one wants to talk about attraction when it comes to marriages failing. No one. Everybody want to talk about what is morally upright and all that kind of stuff. Those things are good. They're bare minimum, but they go right out the window in terms of intentionality when when you follow this routine gravity lane. Okay, so now neediness. Now we end up with neediness. You end up back at routine. That's what I want us to talk about today. You end up back at routine. It's like this very bad loop. All right. Does this make sense so far? I want to break this down for you so you can avoid this in your own marriage. When it gets down to it, you're not going to be able to get away with the idea that you're a good person. That's good for you. You can live a fulfilled life if you want to live by yourself, just being a good person. But when another person is involved, yes, even a person who committed to a lifetime with you, when that person is involved, the stories will change. All right. The story. See, there was a period when Lola and I were sleeping in the same bed almost every night, but we had virtually no intimacy. I'm speaking from a place of experience where, thank goodness, we're celebrating 19 years this year. Been with her for about 22, 23 years now. But obviously, that's not overnight. So from the outside, we still looked married. We lived in the same house, raised our children, and handled responsibilities. But internally, we had become roommates, like most people that claim to be married today. See, that experience taught me that proximity is not connection. Sharing a mattress does not mean you're sharing desire. Attraction and a marriage can be so far apart, you know. You can be inches apart physically on a daily basis and already separated emotionally, you know. So before we get into the whiteboard, I'm about to go deeper right now. Let me ask you a direct question. Are you living like roommates right now and you don't know whether your marriage can still be saved? I understand it. Stop guessing, okay? Book your private discovery session with us. Just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery and we will help you identify what stage your marriage is in and what is destroying attraction and what you can, because anybody who is attracted to you, the last thing they want to do is leave you, even if they really want to, even if everything points in that direction. If the attraction is alive, they will usually find it difficult to leave. And what you can control is really all you should be focused on. But do you even know the difference? And a lot of people, they don't know the difference. All right, so let's get a little bit deeper into today. The first thing on this list, again, we're talking about why your marriage feels like roommates and how attraction disappeared. Then I'm going to help you connect back to reconnection reconnection back to attraction and awareness so that you can actually use this over and over again. Like I said, it all starts with routine. In fact, a lot of our clients, they come into this program from this same issue, you know. And when one of them came into our program, her husband remained primarily in another country entirely. And at some point, they were finally together. And she said it felt like a marriage, but more so like roommates because they had been apart. You know how some people will say distance makes the heart fonder, right? Yeah, not always. It depends, you know, because none of this stuff is exact science. It's a science, but because of human emotions, things can vary from place to place. So they still had children, of course. They have history, they have responsibilities, connecting them together. But she had begun questioning whether she wanted the marriage at all. And that's a problem, okay? And the problem specifically was not, it's not a dramatic argument like most people assume, you know. It was prolonged distance, you know, and that slowly made the relationship feel unnecessary. And once a relationship starts to feel unnecessary like that, people start to fantasize about the idea that maybe they don't have to be together after all. So yes, today I definitely want to go through routine, neglect, resentment, rejection. So how does this happen exactly? Let's first of all talk about routine. Okay, let me go ahead and talk about routine first. How do we end up in this space of routine, right? So I call this the roommate's gravity loop, because once a marriage enters this cycle, every uncorrected behavior pulls it even deeper. It goes like, it just gets worse, right? So it all begins with routine, of course, right? And the routine is not automatically bad. Like, it doesn't start off as bad. It's just families. If you're trying to put a family together, it requires structure. And but the problem that we're talking about today, which is ending up becoming a roommate, begins as a routine, right? And but if it becomes the only energy in the relationship, right, that becomes a problem. You wake up, you go to work, children, bills, food, television in the evening, even though some people crave that badly as quality time. For some people, it's negative, right? You jump on the phone, in and out, sleep, and then you repeat that same process again. And then comes neglect, right? What do you mean by neglect? It's just life. What do you mean by neglect? Well, all it takes is one person, starting to feel neglected, right? It's not necessarily evil neglect. Often, something that, like I said earlier on, comes from an unconscious place, at best, subconscious place. So you're partly awake, partly sleeping when all of this happens, right? Both people assume the relationship will maintain itself because they're married. If we're married, the relationship is supposed to be automatic. Everything should be happening automatically, and there's no need to worry about anything else, like such as attraction, right? So like I said, it's often a subconscious thing, right? Both people just make this crazy, terrible assumptions from a subconscious place. So neglect produces resentment. How? Because one person starts to really feel something that's a little bit off, right? They can't put their finger on it, but they know something is wrong somewhere, right? Eventually they might get to a place where they start to feel it as they feel unseen, they feel unheard. You've heard that before, hopefully. Right? Undesired. They don't feel wanted by you, right? They feel overworked, maybe overwhelmed, house chores, maybe by bills, responsibilities, financial weight, or they start feeling taken for granted, feeling unappreciated, right? So that's resentment, right? If it happens long enough, that's resentment that you might never be able to come back from, right? And that resentment will produce withdrawal. Not cool. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah? Withdrawal. Because if a person resents you, right, the last thing they want from you is any type of touch. Don't touch me, right? Oh, and they might even catch themselves like, oh, my bad, I didn't mean it like that, right? Kind of like they kind of mean it. They kind of mean it, right? Because again, it's subconscious. It's half awake, half asleep. Reflex actions, right? But it's coming from a place, right? You might not even pay attention to it, right? They started because you entered the room, right? But it never used to be like that. How did it become this, right? Well, playfulness disappears, right? How do you have a romantic relationship without playfulness? I'll tell you how. A lot of people justify, well, we're in a marriage, we're in a long term. Are we kids? We're not children, right? Well, you feel that way. There's a good chance, an extremely good chance, that your partner does not feel that way, or vice versa. Maybe you feel like, no, I want some playfulness. Why are we always so serious? But your partner is like, hey, let's get to business. We have a marriage, we have children, we have responsibilities. Why are you worried about nonsense like that, right? This is just their mindset. They don't often say it out loud, right? And of course, they still want sex, right? But that sex start to feel less natural. It feels like a chore, right? Some people call it dutiful sex. Well, some people call it dutiful versus beautiful sex. Well, if all you have is dutiful sex, just imagine that, right? I'm not arguing against the idea of dutiful sex where you just do it because you're married. Yeah. But if that's all you've got, that's a problem, right? Conversations become transactional. This is why I laugh when people say love is transactional. It's like, what do you mean? There's nobody that wants to be in any type of love exchange that feels transactional. Are you saying that to justify the bullshit that you feel? Because a lot of people do that. They will just say things that feel good short term, but when it comes to real life, nobody wants to be in that type of exchange. There's no paycheck next Friday. Why are we talking about transactions again? You're supposed to just love me, right? Oh, okay, you're not supposed to, but it feels better when you just love me. So we're just going to disconnect from the reality of feelings. Nobody cares about anything outside of their feelings. That's the reality. So even when we're claiming logic, right, it's because it makes us feel like we're saying something that makes sense in the minute. All of us are guilty. You get what I'm saying? So again, the point here is that resentment produces withdrawal, touches reduces, and there's no longer bountiful playfulness in the relationship. It's just boring. Everything else is certain. Like we know we're going to wake up in the same position every day. It's routine. Something that's supposed to be a good thing ended up becoming bad. So withdrawal produces rejection, of course, right? Because what does that mean, right? One person reaches for affection or literally sex and gets turned down. If you've ever felt rejected, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You felt turned down, and that is interpreted in your head as that's the rest of your life because it's rejection. Rejection doesn't feel good, right? So if one person gets turned down, what happens, right? They feel rejection, right? And rejection breeds obsession. Not good. Rejection breeds obsession. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. I always forget to say that. Don't shy away from using the chat to ask questions as we navigate some of these issues that is happening in real life marriages as we speak. Majority of them. Okay? That's why we're out here trying to do the Lord's work. Okay? Rejection breeds obsession. What do I mean by obsession? Well, when you feel rejection, it feels like you start to reflect on everything that feels like it in the past. You start to get obsessed over trying to fix it, and that creates neediness, right? So obsession is how you get to a place of neediness, and neediness is not sexy, right? So maybe you don't interpret what you do as neediness. Never mind what you do. Imagine that moment where you felt like somebody was a leech, right? They just felt like they're just nagging, right? It's your feelings, so you never really see it from their point of view, right? You almost never see it. You have to have a certain level of self-awareness to see it from their point of view. Most human beings are terrible at this. They just see their point of view and that's it, and they call it the truth. All right. So, but neediness is not good. When it comes to this topic, we're talking about attraction in marriage. Okay, we're talking about if you fix this one thing, everything else is not automatically fixed, but they just become dramatically easier to fix. Do you understand what I'm saying? So neediness, we have neediness. Neediness is an anti-seducer. It's not where you want to be. Okay, but that neediness connects you all the way back. It takes you all the way back to routine, right? How does that happen? Well, the rejected person begins asking. They start pressing. They start chasing, right? They start complaining. No, they're not just complaining about randoms. These are real things happening. You can find more than enough reasons around anybody living real life to complain about, because nothing is perfect in life. So you can always find something to complain about and be justified for complaining about them. There's nobody's life you go to that's perfect, that there's nothing to complain about. Everybody has something you can complain, something that could be better, something that needs improvement. If your life needs no improvement, you're not really living life. That's something else entirely. That's a zombie, right? So you can always find a good reason to complain. So we're not saying that this behavior, this needy behavior, is unjustifiable. In fact, that's one of the problems. The fact that it's justifiable, but nonetheless, you're destroying attraction in that marriage. You see how that works? It's kind of crazy, right? This life is unfair. Right? Well, welcome to the real world, right? So you start complaining, you start monitoring if they did the right thing. You start, the scripture calls it record of wrongdoings, right? So what world do you go into where there's no wrongdoings, or something that went wrong, or something that could need improvement? It doesn't exist. So what do? You engage it with monitoring. You start monitoring it. Worst case scenario, you might hire a private investigator to start monitoring a person's movements. Yeah, it goes that bad. For some people, they just know when you move the mat the wrong way in the bathroom, right? For some people, they just know that you put the toothpaste in the wrong place. They just notice it all the time. Is that a bad thing to notice it? No. It's how you respond to these real life things that makes all the difference between the losers and the winners. You see how that works? It's not the elimination of wrongdoings or wrong things or wrong outcomes. It's how you respond to wrong outcomes that separate the losers from the winners. Okay? You find yourself, what is neediness? You find yourself always demanding needy. Neediness makes you always demanding reassurance. You're never sure of yourself. You don't feel the confidence. You don't feel you're operating from a place of low self-esteem. Why? Because rejection breeds obsession, which creates neediness, right? You need reassurance, constantly needing reassurance. That's a lot of pressure on another human being, and neediness makes attraction fall even further. It gets worse, guys. So we gravitate away even further and further away from attraction, reconnection, and awareness. And that's the problem we're dealing with in a lot of these cases, guys. All right. Right. That is the loop, guys. Notice that the loop does not usually begin with no sex. It doesn't always start off that way. No sex is often the visible symptom. When you say, hey, that woman is weaponizing sex. For a long time I struggled with that. But then I eventually understood what people are trying to say. I get it. That's what they're talking about, what they feel. Some women will speak that from a place of sympathizing with men. I can also understand that. But really what's going on is something I can see way ahead of most people. So we take the time to break this down, right? No sex is the visible symptom of everything already happening underneath. Everything that you don't see, that's what's usually happening. Okay? So a roommate marriage is not about the house. It's really not about the house. A roommate marriage is not defined by where you sleep necessarily. I don't know. For some reason, I felt the need to say that out loud. It is defined by how you relate. Okay? You can sleep in separate rooms and still be deeply connected. It has nothing to do with bedrooms. Now, there might be some level of correlation, but it has nothing to do with that. You can sleep in the same bed and be emotionally divorced. Yes. Okay. The roommate phase begins when the marriage becomes nothing but logistics. Just making sure the kids are where they're supposed to be, the food is prepared, the food is in the freezer in the beginning of the week. Who is picking up the children? Who is paying the bills? What are we eating? What time are you coming home? We know exactly when you're going to pull into the parking lot, but there's no flirting, no curiosity, no playful energy, no meaningful touch, no sexual tension. You're functioning, but you're no longer relating. Do not confuse a well-managed household with a healthy marriage. I think that's where a lot of confusion is coming from. Your children do not need two adults who can operate the house. That's not all they need. I guess that's a good place to start from, okay? What they need is example of two people who know how to keep love, respect, and attraction alive. All right? So if this is describing your marriage, yeah, it's real. It's real. You're not alone. If this is describing your marriage and you're married but you're living as roommates, you do not have to continue guessing your way through it, and no, you don't have to wait until someone announces separation or divorce. I need space. I love you, but I don't think I'm in love with you. You don't have to wait until such happens. If you're already in that position, you don't have to wait longer or keep guessing. Just book your private discovery session at getmymarriageback.com/discovery, and let's identify what caused the attraction collapse and what you can begin changing without begging, without forcing, without demanding or trying to control another adult. You and I know that's never going to work. All right. So yes, we're talking about why your marriage feels like roommates and how attraction disappeared. Now, what I want to show you is what I call the prestige lover energy loop. Okay. The prestige lover energy loop. So remember, we're still not able to connect to this guy. So we're going to bring it down because we need to find our way to this guy from, well, first of all, let me put this here. The prestige lover energy loop. All right, so this is the new cycle that we need to create, right? We need to break that terrible cycle that we just went through, right? Starting with something that was supposed to be a good thing, right? Routine, right? Routine. Yeah. Started with routine. Started from the bottom. But we need to find our way out of this routine into a place called awareness. Okay. And then we need to create a loop that will keep going through awareness, because education is everything. So that's why I'm happy you're here watching this. A lot of people are doing marriage from a place of common sense. For some reason, that still makes sense to a lot of people, but oh well. I guess people still assume they can do marriage from a place of common sense. You can't. Not in this time and age. It's not going to work, because value is something that keeps moving, and everything you do must come from a place of value. That means you pay attention to how you're being received, how you're being experienced. So how you're going to do that sustainably, you have to go from awareness to grounding. All right, I'm going to explain this in detail, but you got to go to grounding, right? So that whatever it is that you're doing is actually sustainable, right? You don't want to do this from a place of common sense. Common sense is, some people say common sense. I always push against common sense, because you know why? It's the same thing as common sense is not common, okay? It's also the same thing as everybody claims that they have common sense. So I just try to tell you to write, like, you need a little bit more than common sense. That's the point, okay? Grounding will help you with purpose, purpose, because anything you do that doesn't have a strong why behind it is probably going to fail. It has to be a why that's big enough to make you cry, or once upon a time it already made you cry. So you have some experience and you're not just having a bunch of opinions. Majority of people, especially on the internet, they just have tons of opinion, and might I or dare I say useless opinions, and but they're just opinions. And we've democratized the opportunity to have opinions. We should continue to do that, because that's how we hear what people actually feel. But we have to be careful with that. You actually have to have ideas that are grounded in a single source of truth. Very, very important. Okay. Purpose will help you to know when to bring in variety into a place of certainty, because again, certainty is, we all want that, it's a sense of security, right? But at what point it starts to become boring right? And that's why your marriage might feel like roommates, like, wait, just routine, right? So varieties, we need varieties, because human basic needs, as much as we want security, certainty, structure, all that, we still want to feel that sense of novelty, fun, playfulness, bountifulness, right? But you have to know when to bring that in. You can't just plug that in, because eventually, so I stumbled into a gentleman, and he was considering our program, and he said his partner always complained about his nonchalant, right? He's nonchalant, like he doesn't, like he's too playful, right? There's a right time and place for everything, right? So yeah, that could be a thing. That's a person trying to tell you that you don't care. They feel as though you don't care, right? So that's another conversation for another day. Variety will lead to curiosity, right? Curiosity, right? So with the right mix, of course. Again, I'll talk a little bit more detail about that in a second. Curiosity. By the time you get to curiosity, this is damn near attraction. Okay. So now you start to smell a level of attraction in this space, right? I'm actually gonna separate it. I'm gonna separate it. Curiosity leads to attraction. Okay. Curiosity leads to attraction. Let's see. All right. This is what we want, right? Well, that's not all the way what we want, but we're getting, remember, if there's attraction, everything becomes easier, right? Everything. So all the actionable things that people are supposed to do becomes easier. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to love each other. You're supposed to treat each other. You're supposed to go on date night. All that, all those things are easier when there's attraction. So again, what people are talking about is they want you to invest in your relationship. I get that, and that's still valid. So I'm actually going to put that on this board right here. Investment, right? Investment. And finally, last but not least, that investment is what leads into attraction, reconnection, right? But even more awareness. So why do I have awareness here? So you can see here that where now the loop is getting bigger, right? The perfect loop for your marriage is getting bigger here. It's getting better, right? So we have awareness here. If you notice, there's a connection here. Do you notice there's a connection between this guy and this guy? And then you can repeat that cycle over and over again. That is the prestige lover energy loop, guys. Okay, that's the prestige lover energy loop. Now let me take a little bit of few minutes to really explain how this works, okay? Because I kind of, I went through that quite very quickly, right? But I want you to take something away from this. Let's put this guy right here. Terrible. I used to be a very good artist. I don't know what happened. But anyway, what we're talking about here, right? I'm giving you the path that if you know what you're doing, that you would go through. 100% of us, we don't know what we're doing until we've gone through some shege, until we've seen the other side, which is the crazy loop I showed you earlier on. This loop. Majority of us, hold on, let me make sure. Okay, we're talking about why marriages feel like roommates. Okay, majority of us, if you've gone through this, then you know that you don't want to be in this space, right? So if you haven't gone through it, you won't get it, but we'll wait. We have patience. Okay, so awareness. Awareness, right? Awareness simply means in spite of the routine, you know something is off. Maybe your partner is complaining. Maybe you're feeling disconnected, right? And everything kind of feel fine. In fact, you feel guilty that you feel the need to complain, right? So everything is fine because you're still together. But right? But you being able to understand that there's something off, but everything is fine. Let's call that grounding, right? Let's call that grounding, because some people will react the opposite direction. They just start disconnecting, right? Maybe it's your partner disconnecting, right? But instead of reacting or going the direction of panic, right? You stop making the other person responsible for stabilizing you, right? Instead of you complaining, you kind of realize that you're also part of, you're feeding the cycle, right? So that's a level of grounding that you should appreciate if you have the ability to do that. Sometimes you're the first person that lead your marriage in that direction. You have the courage to be able to say, well, it's not their fault, but something is still off. A lot of people, they can't think about something is off or wrong or feels wrong outside of looking for whose fault is what. They're always looking for who is at fault about something, and they can't think outside of that. They have to point finger at something else or someone else but self, right? So but that grounding, what it does is that it creates room for purpose. All right, that grounding creates room for purpose. Like I said, you need purpose in doing anything that matters in life, because if you're just doing it just because, what is just because? Morals is one of the things that is just because. What do you mean morals is just because? Because again, you've been socialized to be that way, and you're probably just operating from a place of you're numb. You're pushing it down other people's throats, justifying it, but you're forgetting that not everybody really have the same moral compass, right? Moral compass is not left or right. There's a lot that goes into that, right? How you interpret don't steal, you will find it interesting that some people might interpret that completely differently. So you need to have room for the possibility that they think about these things differently, right? So grounding creates room for purpose. You become a full human being, okay? Probably for the first time in your life, right? Not merely a desperate person trying to save a marriage from a place of you're just supposed to be here. Like, okay, if that's how they worked, there won't be so many people in divorce court, right? Purpose naturally introduces variety. Again, this is one of 6 basic human needs, all right? In that 6 basic human needs, we have certainty, but we also have variety. Varieties literally is almost translating to direct opposite of certainty, but that's how interesting we are as human beings, right? It's not as simple as one side or the other. It's not all or nothing. It has never been that way, right? So your energy, the schedule, thinking, presence, you stop being completely predictable, right? You're not obsessed with things has to be a certain way. You can find it interesting that, wow, there's a shift, there's a drift in some other directions that I'm not interested in, but you find it, you look for interest. You find it interesting to engage those and explore and see, hey, what is this new thing, right? As opposed to just being a zombie, right? That's something, right? Now you might be on the other end who you like playfulness, but the other person is the opposite of it, right? You're able to embrace differences. Is what we're talking about, right? Some people struggle with embracing differences. This is why they say find who's like you, find who's compatible. They're obsessed with compatibility. That's why you see people often will bring up marry your type. That's one of the most useless advice I've ever heard, by the way. Because if that was a real thing, everybody would already be doing that. So there's a problem with that advice in the first place, because it's not real. It's not real. Why are people not marrying their type if that's a real thing? Because they're attracted to something else, obviously. But when real life kicks in, people don't know what to do with that, right? And they start to give this. I'm trying to be nice, but it's lame advice nonetheless, okay? Because it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really carry any weight. It's advice and opinions for randoms that are not going through anything, right? If you have a lot at stake, like a whole marriage, and you've married your type as far as you thought you did, right? But then they've drifted or there's been a change. You don't just say, oh, I made a mistake. I married the wrong person. You find it interesting that they are different from the version of what they were yesterday, and you engage that, and that you become curious, right? But again, speaking of curiosity, so now variety creates curiosity. Isn't that interesting? Variety creates curiosity, guys. Okay? Curiosity is the openness that creates attraction, right? Because now you're actively getting drawn. You might be doing intentionally because it's grounded. That intentionality is translating to attraction. You're finding it interesting that, wait, what you've had all along is actually more interesting than anything in the streets. It's just your outlook on life, just because you have a better understanding, awareness, right? So attraction encourages renewed. When the attraction creeps in, well, it's not creeping in because you're doing this intentionally. You have to build this out. It's not automatic like the previous crazy loop that throws people all the way to divorce court. This one, you have to work on building this. But what it does is that it creates, the attraction creates an opportunity. Now people feel the need. Now they feel the need to invest in your relationship, as opposed to we're just going to intentionally invest. No, you need a certain level of attraction to help you encourage investment. It encourages renewed investment. When I say investment, it's not just about date night yet. Just the renewed vested interest, the interest, right, in wanting to work on the marriage has to be grounded in everything that led to us here in the first place. And you know what most people do? They're trying to jump into investment, or they try to manipulate their partner into wanting to invest in the relationship. And that's why it never works. If it works, it's short term, it's temporary. Have you ever seen the back and forth from therapy? You go to therapy, you come back, you go to counseling, you go back, you did a family meeting, you keep going and coming, and yeah, you ever had this experience before? That's why. This is why. Okay, because you're jumping, it's like people jumping into give and take, and they don't want to give first. I know it makes logical sense suddenly, right? But that's literally what people say. They say relationship is give or take. Yeah, working relationships, not the one you have to build from scratch, not the one that you have to rebuild from a place of damage or damages, or where somebody's already disconnected for whatever reasons, outside of they're just doing the wrong thing. If they're doing the wrong thing and it's that simple, just dump them. You know why you're not dumping them? Because it's never that easy. So the new investment gives you deeper awareness of what strengthens and what weakens the relationship. Now you know. When you're coming from a place of you now know, right? It's, you know how people say knowledge is power. You know, the reality is that executed, implemented knowledge is what becomes power. This knowledge is the least. Knowledge is everywhere, right? In fact, people know too much, if you ask me, which is why they're no longer curious, which is why attraction is being killed everywhere. People know way too much, guys. Okay, so this is not a trick to manipulate anyone. As you can see, like I told you, it takes work, but you being here is already part of the work, right? You're doing the necessary work that most people just don't do. Most people will never find this information. How lucky, right? So it's a change in the emotional and social energy that you're personally responsible for bringing into the marriage. Is that making sense? Okay. Desire cannot be negotiated with, it's transaction, so everybody should just show up to the TP. Everybody should play their role. Trust me, they're playing their role. Exactly what you have is exactly what it is. If you can just face that truth first, I think you might be able to operate a little bit better. So again, desire is what we're talking about. It cannot be negotiated. You cannot argue someone into wanting you. Go figure. Why should that be a stretch? That should make sense, right? You cannot shame someone into touching you. Because you didn't touch me yesterday, so now because you feel guilty, touch me. Do you really want somebody that feels guilty touching you? Is that really what you want? You cannot complain someone into becoming romantic, right? That literally kick against what you desire. So you see, again, it's working against itself already. And you cannot schedule enough date nights to compensate for energy that has become needy resentful, and predictable. It's boring. It's boring, guys. Attraction responds to who you are being, actually what you are becoming, because they can smell it, because we're spirits, right? And not merely what you're requesting or what you're demanding. And you know, it's the same conversation around trust, respect, attraction, desire. You cannot demand those things into existence. They only work against them. So this does not mean you accept neglect. That's not the point. Okay? It means you stop wasting power on demands that have already failed. You become grounded, you become purposeful, you become emotionally disciplined. That requires self, right? You become emotionally disciplined. Emotional intelligence, yes. Okay. Awareness, yes. Right? You bring curiosity. You become more interested. Just for being here today, you become more interested in learning more about this, right? You become you become more curious. You bring curiosity and variety back into your own life. That makes it more interesting. Guess what? They can feel it. That makes being with you even more interesting. You're not doing this to perform, because anything performative will fail because it's not grounded, right? You're not doing this to perform to another person. This is for you. You cannot lose going through this path. Okay? You're doing it because desperation is unattractive. Needy behavior is unattractive. And resentment is exhausting. And in due time, you'll find out. And victimhood will never lead your marriage out of crisis. The best you're going to get out of victimhood is sympathy from a bunch of strangers. Yes, you will definitely get that for sure. So, I don't know, maybe your marriage is in this space right now. Maybe your marriage still has love, but the desire is gone. Maybe you're still sharing a home, but you're no longer feeling chosen. Maybe you're trying to save the marriage alone. You feel like you're the only one fighting for the marriage, and every attempt seems to push the other person even further away. I feel your pain. I'm sorry you're going through that, but this is exactly why the private discovery session matters. Okay, you can book a private discovery session at getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Let's determine where you are exactly, because if you don't know where you are, or you're trying to guess your way through it, there's a good chance you'll be operating from a place of feelings naturally. Okay, so let's work together. We'll determine whether you're dealing with a temporary attraction collapse, a deep resentment, emotional disengagement, abandonment possibly, or a marriage already moving towards separation. You will have the best version of the truth, because I'm not in the marriage with you anyway. Most roommate marriages do not begin because two people stopped loving each other. That's not how it starts. Contrary to popular belief, or DV, or any of the worst case scenario, one too many that we have out there, right? Most situations are normal people like you and I, good people that are trying to do the right thing, and they begin with usually they begin because two people they might even be trying to be intentional, but they're doing it the wrong way. They're doing it outside of attraction. Responsibility has replaced romance, sadly. Routine, right? Familiarity, see finish. Taking each other for granted has replaced curiosity. Resentment has replaced playfulness. Everybody's so serious, uptight. Pressure has replaced desire. So this is usually the case. Both people, they've called their result normal marriage. They've normalized it as like it is what it is, right? I want to tell you, no, it's not normal. Okay, and eventually something will give way, and you should not wait for an affair. If you're already going through that, I'm sorry, but even at that, it comes down to the same process. Okay, but no, you don't have to wait. If you're not experiencing that, if you already feel, you're already having doubts, you have questions, unanswered questions, a disconnect, right? All of those are as good as an affair, separation, divorce, and it's just a ticking time bomb. So a marriage can survive a difficult season for sure, there's no doubt, but it cannot remain a love affair when both people are only showing up as employees of the same household. All right. So, yeah, if today's lesson helped you, if you got something good out of this, I'd appreciate if you like this video, subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. And if your marriage feels like a roommate situation, the touch, attraction, intimacy, desire has disappeared, just book your discovery session. It's private, for just you. getmymarriageback.com/discovery. That's where you want to go. Okay, and we can tailor this particular into your situation. Everybody's story is unique, everybody's landmine is different. Curveballs are going to come from different angles. Okay, with that being said, go ahead and watch some other videos. We got some really cool stuff over here, and if you want to find me, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Hopefully you've been enlightened, educated. See you on the next one. Take care and God bless. Peace.
Are you fighting to save a marriage or a relationship, or simply avoiding to end up in a broken or toxic one?
We've been there and you're in the right place. You see, inside this book, right, you will find and you will discover the secret to save a broken marriage, and you will learn how to build and attract the marriage of your dream.